lot of questions that had come in about owning rentals, not renting, but essentially owning a rental and doing something with it. So let me give you a quick sample of the kinds of questions that we've been getting from folks. Let's do it this way. Yeah. So here's a couple that we're going to round all these up. So one question we got here, and this is from Daryl. Daryl is a member of the Islander Ohana, and he said, he's basically asking, our goal is not to use Hawaii, but to come and live here and become part of it. So what we'd like to do is, he's saying, would you consider it right and wise to purchase a smaller condo now, which doesn't fit your family, use it for a vacation 2 to 3 months each year and be cramped for the short time, with our case with little children, and rent it out for the remaining time during those prep years using a property management company? Then when you're ready to move, sell it and buy the actual home that you'd want to live in. My thought is that you've held some of the equity to curb the inflating prices, as well as gain at least some modest rent after paying the management company. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I assume there are some property management companies that can assist with renting, cleaning, and helping renters. Will they think of it, or will they do it, or will we get fleeced as mainlanders? So Daryl's question is really from an investment perspective. Should I buy something now to curb these prices, right? To kind of ride the wave, if you will, and then when we actually move here years down the road, sell the condo and we've got some appreciation. And in the meanwhile, can we rent it and use it? That's one question. Another question. Here's another one. Buying a vacation rental home. We're planning to buy a place in Oahu as a vacation home for a few weeks a year and then rent out when not used, almost like Daryl. And we want to spend some more time in retirement there. We'd like to have a place with some ocean water and easy access to good swimming to the ocean. Could you please help us in comparing these options? Single family, condos, minimum 1 month rental, condos allowing short term, ko'olina, etc. Again, same kind of question that we want to kind of lop in. Here's another one for the Big Island. We're aloha everyone. This is from Judy. We're planning to buy soon and then rent our home in Hawaii out to others for a few years. Same kind of questions. What's your take on this? Good idea, bad idea? They're looking on the west side of the Big Island, the Waikoloa district. What's going on right now? Here's another one from two questions from Judy, and then we're trying to decide whether to buy now in Kona and rent the home out for 3 years. We're moving here, and any advice would be appreciated. Here's another one. Long-term rental from Vida Santa Rosa. How difficult it is to buy long-term rental houses on the Big Island, finding reliable property management. Would love to be able to rent to a family who would ideally stay there for more than a couple years or even longer. So there's more of a longer-term rental. We need at least a 4% return on investment and gross rents. Okay, 2 adjacent or attached residences would be even better, so we could even have a vacation home. Then at retirement in 5 to 10 years, eventually move in and sell or buy something else on the Big Island. You get the pattern here? So we're going to lop all these together because there's been a lot of questions that are related today. Here's another one from Urid in Dallas, Texas. Is buying short-term rental eligible condo a profitable business? Have vacation condo prices come down due to COVID? Well, they haven't come down, but you get the idea, right, folks? So everyone's asking about how do we kind of do this general idea of buying some kind of a rentable property now, buying it, using it for vacations, kind of here and there, but, renting it out when we're not there, holding on to it. And then when we move to Hawaii, either move into that unit or sell that unit and buy a real house. That's the big topic. So that's kind of what the general setup is. So here's how we're going to break this up. We're going to break this up, and what we're going to do is we're going to go around the table here. We're going to do our owning rentals roundtable. So we're going to go through Scott, Dylan, and Heidi. And what I want to talk about first is, what are the best locations? So on Oahu for Scott, or Big Island for Dylan, or Maui for Heidi. What are the best locations that are good for doing this kind of thing? And what are some regulations you need to know about? So I wanted to get those 2 questions first from each of you. Let me bring everybody up on the screen here. I'm going to get those 2 questions first from each of you. Best locations and what regulations do you need to know about in related to the kinds of things we talked about, which is buying a condo, using it and renting it out, using it and renting it out, and then later kind of selling it. So those are the 2 things first. And once we get that, let's do that quickly, but let's get the answers. And then we're going to come back and talk about the money aspect. And the way I kind of want to break that up is on the dollars is, Dylan, Give us a perspective, what you need to know, again, from the financial perspective as an operator. If this is your piece and you're doing it, what do you need to know about, what are important about the numbers if you're the owner of this rental? Scott, hit it from the investor perspective. If you're investing in this sort of thing, what kind of are the investment parameters that you need to know? And then finally, Heidi, from a vacationing perspective, what is it that you need to know? What should you be keeping in mind about from the dollar perspective of whether this is going to pay for itself or not pay for itself, or how would this work? Y'all got that? So we're going to hit the regulation, the locations of the regulation first, across the board. Then I'm going to go back around and we'll talk about the financial aspect. I set this up generally, but you all know how it goes. This is just to kind of get some organization to our conversation, and we're gonna talk about it and see how it all flies. Okay. I think I did that whole thing in one breath, right? Okay. Let's start. Scott, why don't we start with you? What are the best locations to do this, and what regulations are important that you need to know about?
I mean, best locations. Actually, I don't think it matters so much. It's in fact, I closed last week on a Kapolei townhouse where they're doing this exact thing. They're buying, renting it out, and down the road they'll be able to use it to get them to where they want to go on the next property. Now, that's minimum 30-day rental. That's workforce housing kind. That's not in the tourist districts, so it kind of depends on what you're looking to do. You can go into Waikiki, Ko'olina, or you can go into Turtle Bay. Those are the main places for your resort zone short-term vacation.
So we got three. We got Waikiki, Ko'olina, and Turtle Bay. Those are the ones for the folks that want to have a kind of vacation rental. Okay, short term. The folks that want to own it and come out for vacations every so often and then rent it out when they're not there. Okay, what are some regulations that are important that you should keep in mind for Oahu? Because I know the regulations are different for each island. What should you know, generally speaking, on Oahu, so as you kind of go through this process?
Yeah, so if you want to do the short-term vacation rental, you need to be in the resort zone districts, period. That's it. And those are the three areas. You get outside of that, it's minimum 30-day or greater, depending on the restrictions.
So, for example, if I bought, I bought a single family home on Oahu, and I want to rent it out. So it's not really feasible to think. What I'm hearing you say is it's not really feasible or perhaps legal to rent out that house for 2 or 3 months, or to rent it out. Okay, I'm singing no there, right?
No, you can rent it out for 2 or 3 months. It's minimum 30 days. If you're in residential zoning or apartment zoning, it's minimum 30 days, unless you're in an association community that is more restrictive, meaning they'll have some kind of CC&Rs in there that require you to rent it for a longer period of time. So it's whichever is more restrictive at that point. But it's 30 days, minimum 30 for single family homes typically.
So it's a 30-day minimum, right? But it's not like it's not sort of your vacation rental. You can't Airbnb the house out for a week, so to speak, right?
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah, that's the issue. You can't.
Yep.
So basically, what you want to be doing on Oahu is you want to be Waikiki, Ko'olina, or Turtle Bay. If you're looking at a vacation rental that you want to own, come out for a vacation, rent it out for the rest of the year. Great. Dylan, what are the districts? I've got that map ready if you want to show that. I've got what are the districts the locations and regulations that are important that you should know about on the Big Island?
So location-wise, it's interesting because I wouldn't say there's one location that's necessarily better than others because they have their advantages and disadvantages, but you have a lot of people that don't want the traditional resort experience. So surprisingly, a lot of my clients who buy or had operated rentals in rural areas prior to regulations going into effect and then maybe got their license to continue to do it, do very, very well. And they almost are more profitable because they have a lower cost to get in. You can buy a home in a rural area for a lot lower price point and rent it for somewhat of a similar, lower, but somewhat of a similar per night cost. And then a lot of times it's booked for more time than the areas that are more touristy and resorty. And so those folks end up doing better. Of course, the conventional wisdom is a condo in a resort area is going to do very well and the beach is going to do very well. So it works both ways. It kind of just depends on what your preference on ownership is. So I wouldn't say there's like a specific area that is better per se than others because there's disadvantages and advantages to all areas. But on the Big Island, it's very complicated. The regulation is very complicated. So you do want to reach out and have a in-depth discussion about that. I got several videos explaining it on my YouTube channel. But first, you got to determine whether or not you're in the right zoning. And then potentially, if you're not in the right zoning, there could be a non-conforming use permit that was applied for 2 years ago, and they got it, so they can continue to rent it because they're kind of grandfathered in. If you're doing single family home and you're not renting the whole home out completely, the whole regulation doesn't apply. So if you have like a guest quarters or an upstairs downstairs type situation, you can rent. So you really got to evaluate. There's no good way, public way, unless somebody puts it in the comments, to really know what the situation is. And we have to do some evaluation on the back end on zoning and other things, because even if it has the correct zoning, if it's a condo that has the correct zoning, but the CCNRs of the condo restrict rentals to 30 days, then that doesn't work for that condominium complex. So you really got to take it kind of case by case, and there's no simple. They haven't figured out a simple way to filter and search for that publicly. We kind of got to do it on the back end on the MLS.
So the word I'm hearing you say is that, okay, the districts are less important, frankly, than the district per se, is knowing the specific issue with that specific property that you're interested in. And there's no way to do like a Zillow search to say, hey, show me all the properties that are, vacation rental approved on the big on, so to speak.
And same thing, you could have units in a condominium complex that has the correct zoning that doesn't have the permit yet. So you can buy any unit in that complex, apply for the permit, and then go ahead and rent it once you get the permit. That's an important thing to consider, because it can take up to 90 days for the county to respond to you. So once you close, you could have a 90-day period before you're approved to rent it. And so those are some costs you're going to have to eat waiting for that approval. So sometimes people prefer to shop in complexes where the unit that specifically already has the permit in place, because they can continue to rent it immediately. But that shouldn't deter you. If there's a complex you really like and a unit you really like, you can get the permit. You're just going to have to wait a couple of months before you can actually rent it legally.
Yeah, with that, as my eyes roll back into their sockets with all the complexity here, it's like, yeah, you better have someone who knows what they're doing about the market. Don't go into this, don't do buying, don't do search buying by Google. Don't do investment properties by Google searches. Heidi, what are the districts that are good on Maui, and what are some of the regulations that people should know about?
Sure. Well, the best areas to buy a vacation rental condo are probably going to be South Maui, Kihei, Wailea, and then also West Maui, which is Kaanapali, Napili, Kahulua, Lahaina, all those areas. And that's where you're going to have the largest inventory of properties that allow vacation rentals. If you're buying a vacation rental on Maui, it's probably going to be a condominium. We have lots of condominium complexes and areas on Maui that allow vacation rentals. You don't need any permit. You can just buy it. You can start renting it right away. Easy. Now, when it comes to a single family home, it gets a lot more complicated. First, you'd have to own the home for 5 years. Then, assuming it's in a community that would allow this, then you apply for a permit with the county. They send out letters to all your neighbors. Anybody has a chance to object to your plans to do a vacation rental. And there's really no guarantee that you can get a permit. Even if you were to find a listing that was already a legal permitted vacation rental home, if you purchase it, the permits are not transferable. So if you purchase it, you can't continue vacation renting it. You'd have to start the process over. So anyway, if you want to do vacation rentals, I'd recommend looking at a condominium that allows it. It's way easier. And I also wanted to note that a short-term rental on Maui is considered anything less than 180 days, which is 6 months. So we don't have any of that 30-day thing that they have on Oahu. It's a vacation rental, which could be nightly, weekly, monthly, whatever you want, or it's 6 months or longer. And that's the distinction between long-term and short-term rental on Maui.
So run it by me again. If it's under 6 months, if you're renting under a 6-month period, it's considered a short-term rental. And if it's over 6 months, it's considered kind of a long-term rental. Is that's the distinction?
Yeah, and that's why it's so hard for people that just say, oh, I want a month-to-month rental, or I want something for 2 or 3 months, because the owners of these short-term rentals, they're not really incentivized to give somebody a break for a 3-month rental when they can rent it nightly at the full rate. I mean, that's kind of what I see.
So it's for the same reason that you can't rent out why you wouldn't want to get a hotel room for 45 days because the daily rate would kill you. It's that same reason that it's the people who have short-term rentals are incentivized to rent them out for much shorter terms. There's no such thing as a long-term short-term rental. In other words,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, got it. Okay, great. Okay, so now let's talk about the financial aspects of this over here. So let me kind of refresh my memory as well as your all memory here. So what we're going to do is going to talk about the Dylan kind of hit it from the operator point of view, kind of what is the things that you need to kind of know from the operator's point of view financially, Scott from the investors, and Heidi from the vacationer. Again, this is just general speaking. You can say whatever you want to say. I want to talk about the finances. What do the numbers look like? Like Daryl's question was really about the numbers. Does this make financial sense? There was some question about, I want a 4% ROI. How do you make this work? Dylan, from an operator's point of view, financially, what should you be thinking about?
Definitely one piece is how much work do you want to do, right? So the more of the rental that you outsource, the more cost you're going to have. So if you're going to be an operator and you're going to do the cleanings yourself, you're going to do the bookings yourself, you can obviously make a lot more money if you're going to do all of that stuff, the marketing, all the accounting, paying the taxes, because there's management companies that will do all of that stuff for you, but then you're going to be paying 25, 30% management fee for them to take care of all of those responsibilities for you. So definitely operators who are more involved, I see, do much better. One thing to consider also is like on Airbnb and VRBO, they favor people who are engaged and involved. And so if you're a owner that is posting your property on Airbnb or VRBO and you're very engaged and you communicate and you get back to people quickly and it ends up leading to a very positive review, you're going to have better results on those platforms. If you're just outsourcing the whole thing and it's a management company with 100 units and they're not doing, not giving people that personal touch, it may not benefit your unit as much. So all of that is something you got to consider. And then from a cost standpoint, if you have a mortgage on the property, it's very hard to turn a profit. I mean, even if the rental does very well, when you add in the management fees, the HOA fees, the taxes, and then mortgage on top of that, if you're breaking even, you're probably doing okay. But that's one thing you got to consider. If you're paying cash and you don't have the mortgage cost every month, then it may be profitable. But again, it's a case by case basis. Every single unit is different. The HOAs can vary greatly. So those are all things you got to run the numbers on. And then to just say like I need a 4% monthly ROI, that's a little bit unreasonable because of our seasonal nature, right? We have very high occupancy in the summer and the winter, 90+%. But then in the fall and the spring, it can be under 50%. So you got to more look at it on a yearly basis. There may be months where you make a ton of money and months where you actually lose money, and then it evens out at the end of the year. So you just got to run the numbers and see what works.
Thanks, Dylan. That's a great overview. I think the moral of the story is it depends on how much work you want to do, right? That's the big one. That's a great insight on the Airbnb side. Scott, from an investor perspective, if I was an investor, what kind of things do I need to be thinking about to kind of get up to do the best possible investment if I'm thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, when investors invest, they're typically investing for the numbers, the return on investment. And usually what I tell people is Hawaii is pretty much on the residential side, which is going to include some of the short-term vacation rentals of what I call a cap rate or a capitalization rate. And you can kind of Google what that is at some point. But we're about 4%. And it can be 3.5% to 4.5%. I can kind of get people in those ranges. And the biggest thing is if you're going to use your investment, that means you're taking it out of the investment pool at the time. The more you use it, the less return on your money you're going to get. So you have this big balancing effect that I have to chat with with people sometimes is like, hey, how often do you want to use it? We want to use it 6 months out of the year and we want to be positive cash flow. Okay, well, you've just eliminated income for 6 months out of the year by using it that much. So how do we position you? How much cash do you have to bring in? Do you have to pay all cash in order to be positive cash flow in that capacity? Or can we put some what we call debt servicing or a loan on the property to be able to balance it out? And it's all just kind of looking at the numbers and massaging the game and what's the lifestyle and what's the kind of investment performance you want. We analyze it. Does this make sense for you? Yes, no, you can move forward or not.
Yeah, excellent. I think that's That's what you have to think about. It's all about the numbers and how much cash you want to put down. And I think that's a really good point that you brought up, Scott, which is if you use the property, you're sort of taken away. Then the other part of your calculation is, yes, you're using the property, but at the same time, how much would you pay for a vacation if you were to go on a vacation anyway? And how does all that factor? So lots of calculations. I hope you're good with spreadsheets to figure all that part out. Heidi, what do you want to add to this whole conversation about the financial side? I mean, I'll put you down for the vacation perspective, but it could be anything. What do you want to what can you sort of add to what we talked about from the financial point of view that people should be thinking about that we've missed?
Well, I work with a lot of clients who are investing in vacation rentals, and it's always a balance, right? Because you want to have good numbers, you want it to be a good investment, but what you're also investing in is your lifestyle. The best reason to buy a vacation rental on Maui is because you want to come and stay there and enjoy it. And the way to look at it is you're able to rent it out the rest of the year when you're not there and offset your costs. I mean, that's a good way to think about it. And then hopefully make a little bit of money. But really, the ability to do short-term rentals allows you to do that versus owning a property that's going to sit vacant most of the year. So going back to, I think it was Daryl's first question, comment, should I buy something now, a smaller property, and then later invest in a home? I actually think that makes a lot of sense, especially if initially in the next few years or so, you're just going to be able to spend a limited amount of time on Maui. And then maybe down the road, when you're able to spend more time here, it makes more sense to buy a bigger property. And a lot of people do that. And it does give you a chance to spend more time in the area, get to know the areas. I think it's a great way to go.
Thanks, Heidi. Go, Dylan.
One other perspective, right? Even if the property is a break-even property and you get to use it for a month out of the year, for free, right? I mean, there's a lot of enjoyment, there's value to that. And you got to look at the long-term appreciation also. So you may not make the money year over year from the rental standpoint, but over 10 years, you might make a significant return when you sell that property. So that's one thing to factor into the whole equation also is don't focus so much on like the monthly or yearly returns. If you're looking to just park money, and like we're talking about these 5, 10, 20% increases in property values over the years, you could make a significant return on the back end when you actually sell it. And on that note, that's something you really want to consider also as you're looking at it from an investor standpoint. Hawaii has HARPTA, which is a 7.25% capital gains tax on real estate. And so you want to look into that and kind of forecast. If you're going to move to Hawaii and become a resident, you'd be exempted from that when you actually sell the property. But a lot of times that's a disincentive for people to sell property because they're going to get hit with a pretty big tax when they sell it if they're not a Hawaii resident. So something to look into and consider with your CPA before you make that investment.
Yeah, that's a great. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at investments, and why Hawaii is different, and I always kind of chuckle with people because people will come to me all the time and go, "Hey, I want to be cash flow positive and get a 5% return on that cash flow," and then so you're looking at an investment from one component, just the cash flow component. You have this leveraging component that's different than every other place or every other type of investment where you can borrow against. Bring in 20% or 30% of the value of the property, use somebody else's money to borrow against it, have a payment, have a renter pay that portion off and down. So you are getting a return on the principal reduction. Then you got appreciation over time and you got depreciation that you can use on your taxes. So there's actually 4 different ways you can get a return on a property. So I look at cap rate and then what is the life of the performance of that property over time is called an internal rate of return. And that's the bigger analysis that you should do from a property. What is this thing? How is this going to perform in all the different areas based on what you need?
Yeah, that's a great point. And you know what? Tom Kerr agrees. Tom's got a big comment here, so I'm going to pop it over this way. So Tom says, hey, be sure to talk to your accountant. Let me see if I can make a better way to do it. There's no easy way I'm going to make this work, so we'll just do it this way. Tom says, Be sure to talk to your accountant. If you own a condo as a rental, not your residence, then sell your mainland residence and also sell your condo rental at the same time to buy a bigger condo or house. You could face big capital gains tax on the condo sale. Better to sell your mainland residence, move to the condo, live in it for a couple of years. It becomes your residence to avoid the capital gains tax impact. Thanks, Tom. Love the tip. Appreciate it. And again, the moral of the story is, there's a lot of issues over here. There's a lot of moving parts. I hope that we simplified it, but I think in our attempt to simplify, we've also explained the complexity of it. And it's not a trivial thing. You really want to have experts to kind of help you along with this. And all kinds of other questions, like Mark, who's a member of the Islander Ohana, an alumni now, is that less than the capital gains tax on stocks? I don't know what Dylan.
I'm not even talking federal capital gains. I'm talking state capital gains. So your federal capital gains are a whole separate liability you got to examine.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. But I guess he's saying are there state capital gains taxes on stocks? No. Actually, no.
Well,
okay,
actually,
but
I don't know that. I mean, I'm
you
not
got to talk to your accountant.
But yeah,
because
we have all kind of we tax everything in Hawaii, so chances are there is.
And not just that, but I saw the news that there's a lot of taxes that are on deck to be passed. We may be Hawaii may be number one tax rate, number one in income tax rate, number one in capital gains tax rate. So. Not the kind of number one I want, but it is happening. Great feedback from everybody. Jim said.